Did you know the German government once burned entire film reels to prevent citizens from seeing their own history? While Hollywood churned out heroic Allied narratives, German filmmakers struggled for decades to confront their nation's darkest chapter. These 15 films survived destruction, censorship, and outright bans to tell stories the authorities desperately wanted buried forever. Number 15. Der 20. Juli, the 20th of July, 1955. The first film ever made about the failed plot to assassinate Hitler, almost never saw the light of day. Just 10 years after WWII, German officials feared this film would glorify Nazi officers despite their resistance role. Director Falk Harnack knew the conspiracy personally. His own brother was executed for participating in the plot. The government demanded 17 cuts before allowing release, eliminating any scenes suggesting German military honor. What makes this film explosive isn't just its content, but its timing. West Germany was desperately trying to rebuild its military reputation as it joined NATO, making officials nervous about scenes showing Wehrmacht officers as either heroes or villains. The film walks this impossible tightrope, portraying conspirators like Klaus von Stauffenberg sympathetically without excusing the regime they served. Critics initially dismissed it as premature history, with Der Spiegel calling it tasteless opportunism. Yet audiences quietly filled theaters, making it one of 1955's most successful German films, despite zero international distribution. Most shocking was its authentic Berlin locations. Bombed buildings weren't sets, but actual war damage still visible a decade later. The film's lead actor, Wolfgang Preiss, later revealed military advisors threatened to withdraw cooperation if certain dialogues weren't cut. They were terrified we'd remind people that German resistance came too late, he said in a 1975 interview. But that was precisely the point. Number 14. Die Mörder sind unter uns. The Murderers Are Among Us, 1946. Shot in the literal ruins of Berlin with borrowed Soviet equipment, this was the first German film produced after WWII. DIFA Studios rushed it into production before denazification tribunals finished their work, causing panic among occupation authorities who feared its vigilante justice theme might trigger actual killings of former Nazis still living openly among the population. Director Wolfgang Staude, who rejected Nazi film opportunities during the war, fought Soviet censors over the ending. They demanded the protagonist execute his former captain, who had ordered civilian massacres. Staude insisted on showing him arrested instead, arguing Germans needed legal justice, not more bloodshed. The compromise delayed release by months. The film's female lead, Hildegard Knef, later revealed Soviet officials confiscated and destroyed multiple scenes, showing German soldiers as victims rather than perpetrators. They wanted Germans portrayed only as monsters or heroes of resistance, she wrote in her memoir. The messy middle truth wasn't politically useful. When finally released, the film drew massive crowds despite theaters being unheated ruins with makeshift projection equipment. East German authorities later suppressed it during the Cold War for its bourgeois individualism, while West Germany restricted screenings for its communist production values. The most chilling aspect? Several minor actors were actual Wehrmacht veterans awaiting denazification hearings, essentially playing fictionalized versions of themselves, while their real war crimes remained uninvestigated. Number 13. Das Boot, 1981. This claustrophobic U-boat thriller faced banning in West Germany for glorifying Nazi military prowess. Director Wolfgang Petersen spent 3 years fighting government film boards who insisted the movie would revive militarism. The Defense Ministry refused cooperation, forcing Petersen to use scale models and technical advisors who risked prosecution under German laws prohibiting the sharing of military secrets. The film's technical consultant, former U-boat commander Herbert Werner, discovered his war diaries had been classified by Allied authorities and needed special permission to access his own memories. Several scenes accurately depicting Allied targeting of civilian rescue ships were cut after British officials threatened to block UK distribution. What nobody realized during production, the film's financing secretly came from German industrialists who'd built the actual U-boats during WWII. When this connection emerged years later, it sparked parliamentary investigations into whether the film constituted illegal propaganda. Critics were divided along generational lines. Older Germans condemned its humanizing of war criminals, while younger viewers praised its anti-war message. The film's original German version ran 149 minutes, but international releases were cut by nearly an hour, eliminating crucial scenes questioning nationalist ideology. Actor Jürgen Prochnow later revealed the filming conditions caused actual psychological breakdowns among cast members. "We lived in that submarine set for months," he said. "The claustrophobia wasn't acting. It was real trauma that government psychologists later studied as evidence of how submarine warfare affected sailors." Number 12. Die Brücke. The Bridge, 1959. This devastating anti-war film, about teenage boys defending a meaningless bridge in the war's final days, was nearly suppressed for endangering military recruitment. Director Bernhard Wicki received anonymous threats throughout production, and government officials attempted to revoke filming permits when they realized the project showed Hitler Youth members as victims rather than fanatics. What makes this film particularly controversial? It's based on autobiographical events experienced by author Gregor Dorfmeister, who was one of only 3 survivors among 7 boys ordered to defend a bridge near Munich. Military historians later confirmed the incident was tragically common, with thousands of children sacrificed in symbolic last stands. The German Defense Ministry demanded scene cuts, showing officers abandoning the boys, claiming it misrepresented military honor. Wicki refused, creating permanent enemies within West Germany's newly formed Bundeswehr. When the film won Golden Globe Awards, German officials boycotted the ceremony rather than celebrate its international recognition. The young actors, all amateurs selected from Munich schools, faced harassment after release. Lead actor Volker Lechtenbrink later revealed, "People accused us of insulting those who died by suggesting their sacrifices were meaningless. But that was precisely what happened to thousands of children in 1945. Most disturbing of all, during filming in 1959, several unexploded wartime bombs were discovered on location, forcing production halts and serving as grim reminders that the past wasn't nearly as distant as authorities wanted to pretend." Number 11. Deutschland im Jahre Null, Germany Year Zero, 1948. Italian neorealist director Roberto Rossellini infiltrated occupied Berlin to create this devastating portrait of post-war German suffering that occupation authorities tried repeatedly to confiscate. The American military government blocked its release in their sector, claiming it would generate sympathy for the German population when denazification policies required maintaining moral clarity about German guilt. Rossellini shot without permits, using hidden cameras in Berlin's bombed-out landscapes. His 12-year-old protagonist, Edmund, was played by non-actor Edmund Muischke, an actual orphan living in the ruins, who later disappeared after the film's completion, his fate unknown despite decades of searching by film historians. The film's most controversial scene shows Edmund euthanizing his sick father, believing Nazi teachings about eliminating the weak. Censors in multiple countries demanded this scene's removal, calling it morally reprehensible instruction. Rossellini refused, arguing it showed the poisonous legacy of fascist ideology on innocent minds. German critics attacked the film as disaster pornography, while French intellectuals hailed it as necessary witnessing. The film initially failed commercially everywhere, with many theaters refusing screenings despite critical acclaim. It wasn't properly distributed in Germany until 1978, when a new generation discovered its unflinching portrait of national catastrophe. The film's final tracking shot, following a child's suicide, was filmed using improvised dolly tracks through actual rubble, where unexploded ordnance was later discovered. As actor Ernst Pitschau later revealed, "We weren't creating a war zone, we were filming in one, while authorities pretended reconstruction was further along than reality." Number 10. Triumph des Willens, Triumph of the Will, 1935. History's most infamous propaganda film remains technically illegal to screen in Germany outside educational contexts. Director Leni Riefenstahl's Nazi Party rally documentary was systematically hunted and destroyed by Allied forces after the war, with possession criminalized under denazification laws. The German government still owns copyright specifically to prevent unauthorized distribution. What few realize, this wasn't just documentation, but orchestrated reality. Hitler delayed the actual Nuremberg rally, so Riefenstahl could plan camera positions. The supposedly spontaneous crowds followed choreography marks painted on streets. Even Hitler's plane descent through clouds was refilmed multiple times until Riefenstahl approved the lighting. The film pioneered techniques still used in modern propaganda and advertising: moving cameras, aerial photography, long focus lenses creating false intimacy with leaders, and musical scoring timed to emotional crescendos of speeches. Its technical brilliance makes its moral corruption more disturbing. After the war, Riefenstahl spent 4 years in detention camps before being classified as a fellow traveler rather than active Nazi. She spent decades in legal battles claiming the film was merely documentary, despite evidence she rearranged reality to serve Nazi myth-making. German courts repeatedly rejected her arguments. The ultimate irony? The best preserved copies exist because American and Soviet intelligence agencies secretly kept them as study materials for their own propaganda efforts. When German film students request access today, they must sign legal documents confirming educational intent and rejecting Nazi ideology, making it perhaps history's most regulated viewing experience. Number 9. Rotation, 1949. This East German film, about an ordinary printer who reluctantly joins the Nazi Party, was suppressed in West Germany as communist propaganda, despite its nuanced portrayal of how everyday Germans enabled fascism. Director Wolfgang Staude faced travel restrictions after its release, preventing him from attending international festivals where the film won awards. The film's most controversial aspect was showing its protagonist as simultaneously victim and perpetrator, a complexity neither East nor West German authorities found politically useful. East German censors demanded additional scenes, emphasizing communist resistance, while West German distributors refused to touch a DIFA production during escalating Cold War tensions. Actor Paul Esser, who played the lead, was later revealed to have been a former Nazi Party member himself, a biographical detail that added uncomfortable parallels to his character's moral compromises. When this became public, East German authorities considered withdrawing the film, but feared the publicity would only increase Western interest. The film's title refers both to printing, presses, and the rotation of political systems that demand different loyalties while ordinary people struggle to adapt. This metaphor proved too pointed for post-war German audiences, desperate to believe in clean breaks with the past, rather than uncomfortable continuities. Film historian Anton Keiss later noted, "Rotation was dangerous precisely because it refused both West German amnesia and East German heroic narratives. It suggested most Germans were neither monsters nor resistance fighters, but morally compromised survivors navigating impossible circumstances, a truth neither government wanted, centralized in national memory." Number 8. Die letzte Etappe, The Last Stage, 1948. This pioneering Holocaust drama was filmed at Auschwitz just 3 years after liberation, using actual prisoners' barracks and surviving inmates as extras. German authorities blocked distribution, claiming it would inflame anti-German sentiment during Reconstruction. Director Wanda Jakubowska, herself an Auschwitz survivor, fought censorship by reminding officials she'd experienced everything depicted on screen, what makes this film uniquely haunting. Jakubowska convinced Polish authorities to preserve parts of Auschwitz specifically for filming rather than dismantling it immediately. Many scenes were shot in the exact locations where atrocities occurred, using props left behind by fleeing SS guards. Several extras suffered psychological breakdowns when returning to their former prison. The film's German dialogue was written by another camp survivor, ensuring authentic Nazi phraseology rather than sanitized translations. When West German censors demanded changes to make guards appear less sadistic, Jakubowska produced camp records verifying even worse behavior than she'd depicted. The film was finally screened in divided Berlin in 1949, with East Berlin theaters packed, while West Berlin authorities limited showings to late nights with mandatory educational introductions. Several former camp guards still living under assumed identities were reportedly identified by audience members during screenings, leading to investigations. The film's most disturbing legacy. Jakubowska later admitted deliberately toning down actual camp conditions, fearing audiences wouldn't believe the full truth. "I showed maybe 20% of the reality," she revealed in 1995. the actual horror would have been unwatchable. Number 7. Ich war 19, I Was 19, 1968. This East German film about a young Soviet soldier of German origin returning to his homeland as part of the conquering Red Army was banned in West Germany for glorifying Soviet occupation. What authorities really feared, its nuanced portrayal of German suffering alongside acknowledgement of German crimes, undermined the simplistic Cold War narratives both governments preferred. Director Konrad Wolf drew from personal experience. He actually was a 19-year-old Soviet officer despite his German birth and language. His autobiographical approach created uncomfortable authenticity about occupation realities that East German officials tried repeatedly to soften, demanding more scenes of German atrocities to justify Soviet actions. The film was shot in carefully preserved ruins specifically maintained as anti-fascist monuments by East German authorities, creating eerie time capsules of 1945 amid reconstructed 1968 landscapes. Some elderly extras weren't acting, but reliving their actual wartime experiences, leading to unscripted emotional moments directors kept despite censors' concerns. West German critics dismissed it as Soviet apologetics until the 1980s, when new scholarship confirmed the film's military details were historically accurate. Several scenes showing Red Army abuses remained, defying expectations of pure propaganda and contributing to the film's limited distribution even in Soviet bloc nations. Wolfgang Kohlhase, the screenwriter, later revealed, "We walked a razor's edge between historical truth and political acceptability. Every scene was negotiated with authorities who wanted inspiration rather than complexity. Our compromise was showing how difficult occupation was for both occupiers and occupied, making everyone uncomfortable." Number 6. Die Abenteuer des Werner Holt, The Adventures of Werner Holt, 1965. This East German coming-of-age war drama about teenage boys becoming disillusioned Nazi soldiers was restricted in West Germany for humanizing Wehrmacht participation. The 3-hour film follows schoolboys from enthusiastic Hitler Youth members to traumatized veterans, charting moral corruption and eventual recognition of Nazi criminality. Director Joachim Kühnert fought continuous battles with East German censors who demanded less ambiguity about the protagonist's political awakening. Authorities wanted clear denunciation of fascism from the beginning, while Kühnert insisted on showing gradual disillusionment as more psychologically accurate for teenage soldiers. What makes this film particularly subversive? It acknowledges the genuine appeal fascism held for German youth through adventure, camaraderie, and purpose, rather than portraying Nazis as obviously evil from the outset. This nuance made officials on both sides of the Berlin Wall uncomfortable, despite the film's ultimate anti-war message. The film's central tank battle scenes used actual Soviet and German tanks maintained for military training, creating authenticity impossible in Western productions. Several technical advisors were former Wehrmacht officers who insisted on accurate military details despite political pressure to portray German forces as incompetent. Most controversial was the film's suggestion that ordinary soldiers weren't ideological Nazis, but rather products of systematic indoctrination beginning in childhood. This uncomfortable diminishing of personal responsibility contradicted both East German narratives about fascist true believers and West German narratives about a few bad leaders corrupting an innocent population. Number 5. Lebenszeichen, Signs of Life, 1968. Werner Herzog's debut feature about a wounded German soldier who goes insane while guarding a meaningless Greek fortress was nearly suppressed by Bavarian authorities for insulting military honor. Herzog, just 24 during production, faced criminal charges for filming without permits on protected archaeological sites and misrepresenting German military occupation. The film's protagonist, played by Peter Brogel, gradually descends into apocalyptic madness, while rational comrades maintain pointless discipline. This metaphor for Germany's continued military obedience despite inevitable defeat proved too pointed for government officials still sensitive about Wehrmacht conduct on Mediterranean islands. Herzog later revealed he discovered actual unexploded German ordnance during filming on Rhodes, incorporating these dangerous relics into scenes without informing Greek authorities or his cast about the genuine risks. This guerrilla production approach became his trademark, but began from necessity when official support was withdrawn. The film won the Berlin Film Festival's Silver Bear, embarrassing officials who'd tried blocking its competition entry. International acclaim forced domestic reconsideration, though distribution remained limited to art house theaters rather than commercial release. Military historians particularly objected to scenes showing garrison troops drinking and gambling while partisans operated freely. Most disturbing was Herzog's research finding. The story wasn't unusual. Psychiatric records showed hundreds of similar breakdowns among isolated German units during the war's final months. As critic Kraft Wetzel noted, Herzog found a perfect metaphor for fascism itself, maintaining deadly order and discipline even after its purpose becomes demonstrably insane. Number 4. Mephisto, 1981. If you want a film with clean, usable footage and a story built on suppression, Mephisto is the safest upgrade. On the surface, it's a prestige drama. A brilliant stage actor, Hendrik Höfgen, climbs to stardom in 1930s Berlin by feeding the Nazi machine while telling himself he's above politics. But the real scandal sits underneath the script. The film adapts Klaus Mann's novel Mephisto, a book so explosively close to real life that West German courts upheld an injunction that kept it banned from publication for years, after the Grüngens estate argued it violated personality rights. That legal shadow turned the story into a cultural minefield. Not just, what did artists do under Hitler, but who gets to stop you from naming it? Szabo stages Höfgen's rise like a trap. Closing every promotion comes with a quieter compromise, every applause line with a new handler in the wings. By the time he's performing Mephistopheles, the metaphor isn't subtle anymore. The bargain is the career. Unlike many older titles on this list, Mephisto also has modern quality material available for editors, official trailers, and even 4K restoration clips circulate widely. It went on to win the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, which means plenty of legitimate archival coverage exists. Its cinema is evidence that complicity can look like success. Number 3. Der Untertan, The Subject, 1951. This savage satire about a pathologically obedient German citizen rising through imperial society by flattering authority figures was banned in West Germany for slandering German national character. East German director Wolfgang Staude adapted Heinrich Mann's 1918 novel as transparent commentary on the psychological foundations of Nazism, creating diplomatic crises when the film won international awards. West German authorities particularly objected to the protagonist's seamless transition between imperial and Nazi systems, suggesting uncomfortable continuities rather than the clean break with history narrative preferred during Reconstruction. The film remained unavailable in West Germany until 1971, with limited distribution even then. Staude's production faced constant interference from Soviet authorities, who ironically demanded more subtle criticism of authoritarianism, fearing too obvious parallels to their own system. Actor Werner Peters, who played the lead, received death threats from nationalist groups and briefly required police protection after West German screenings began. The film's most controversial technique was intercutting actual historical figures with fictional characters, blurring lines between satire and documentary. This approach directly challenged the few bad apples narrative by showing how ordinary citizens' obedience enables authoritarian systems, regardless of specific ideology. Film historian Anton Schiess noted, Der Untertan diagnosed German society's authoritarian personality disorder decades before psychologists formally identified it. Both governments rejected this diagnosis because it suggested changing flags and anthems wouldn't automatically cure underlying cultural pathologies that made fascism possible. Number 2. Kohlberg, 1945. The Nazi regime's final propaganda epic about a town's resistance against Napoleon cost the equivalent of $100 million in today's currency and was literally filmed as Germany collapsed. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels diverted 187,000 soldiers from actual combat to serve as extras while Berlin was being bombed, creating perhaps history's most delusional production. The film survived despite Allied orders for all Nazi-era negatives to be destroyed because several reels were smuggled to Switzerland by cinematographer Bruno Mondi. German authorities suppressed remaining copies until the 1970s, fearing its effectiveness despite its false historical parallels between French occupation and Allied forces. Director Veit Harlan, who previously made the notorious anti-Semitic film Yud Süß, faced war crimes charges partially based on Kohlberg's production. His defense that he'd been coerced by Goebbels was undermined by evidence he'd enthusiastically diverted critical military resources during Germany's final collapse. The film's premiere was possibly history's most surreal, screened in the besieged fortress of La Rochelle for German troops days before surrender, then in Berlin's Zoo bunker during Soviet bombardment. Actress Christina Söderbaum later described watching with Goebbels as, "Explosions shook the projection room. He kept saying the film would inspire resistance," she recalled, while outside, everyone was fleeing. Most disturbing was the production's human cost. Several extras died during filming when Soviet aircraft attacked, mistaking the historical reenactment for actual military movements. Real ammunition was used in battle scenes due to wartime shortages of blanks, causing additional casualties that went unrecorded in the chaos of Germany's collapse. Number 1. Die Mörder sind unter uns. The Murderers Are Among Us, 1946. The first German post-war film sparked riots at early screenings, when audiences recognized former Nazis among fellow theatergoers. Director Wolfgang Staudte, forced to work under Nazi supervision during the war, created this expressionist masterpiece about a surgeon hunting his former captain who ordered civilian massacres, directly challenging the fiction that war criminals had been removed from society. Soviet occupation authorities, who initially approved the project, attempted halting distribution when they realized its implications for ongoing denazification efforts. The film explicitly showed former Nazis living comfortable middle-class lives, while victims remained traumatized, contradicting official claims about justice being served. What few viewers realized, Staudte cast several minor actors who had been Nazi film workers awaiting clearance from denazification courts, essentially hiding them in plain sight within an anti-Nazi production. This meta-commentary on post-war moral compromises was too subtle for censors, but devastatingly effective for attentive audiences. The film's female lead, Hildegard Knef, later revealed receiving death threats from anonymous former SS members who recognized specific incidents portrayed from their own war experiences. Several scenes directly referenced actual massacres that hadn't yet been documented in denazification proceedings, effectively serving as public accusation. Most shocking was the film's original ending, where the protagonist actually executes his former captain. Soviet authorities demanded revision to show legal justice instead, fearing vigilante killings against former Nazis still living openly throughout Germany. This change arguably undermined the film's power, while revealing occupation authorities' practical concerns about maintaining order trumped moral reckonings. These films weren't just entertainment, they were battlegrounds where Germany fought for control of its own narrative. Some directors faced prosecution, others embraced denial, but each contributed to the painful process of confronting national trauma. Even today, several remain restricted or require educational framing before public screenings. Which of these banned masterpieces shocked you most? And the real question, should governments ever have the power to hide difficult history through censorship, or does suppression only guarantee these wounds never truly heal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.